When meteorologists first saw Hurricane Sandy forming off the East Coast almost 2 years ago, they knew it looked bad. But the resulting damage to New Jersey and New York was so extensive and costly, it forced new thinking about how to prepare for the next storm. Enter Rebuild by Design, a competition sponsored by the federal government asking for innovative ideas of how to protect our coastlines from future flooding. And some of them are pretty far out. Here to sort through them is WGBH News science editor Heather Goldstone. Welcome. So what has Rebuild by Design got on the tap for us?
Well, so there are 10 teams that have been working on their designs for about 6 months. Last week they presented their final designs. And yeah, I mean, the whole point of the competition, as you said, is to really get some big innovative ideas, not just keep rebuilding after storms the way that we already have. And the ideas that they're coming up with are, as you said, in some cases kind of far out there. I mean, there's one called Big U, which is actually, as you can see on this map, kind of the name comes from the fact that it goes all the way around the bottom of the tip of Manhattan, and it's essentially a string of spaces that combine flood protection with open space, recreation space, community space. You know, the idea being to make a multi-purpose areas.
I don't understand what that is. What does that?
Well, so essentially just showing how the areas would transition from what they are currently, which is very industrial or high density residential areas, to a lot more open space that would be both flood control and jogging paths, or, as I said, community space, recreation space. So that's one of them. Some of them, one theme that I kind of noticed in a lot of them is engineering with nature, you might call it, trying to basically create semi-natural habitats. So one of them is called Living Breakwaters, and it's what it sounds like. It's a plan to create out around Staten Island and in New York Harbor these artificial oyster reefs and artificial tide pools, and basically create what might have been there in the past that would be natural flood protection and recreate that artificially.
Is that like the islands? Is that the islands proposal?
No,
is that
so
another one?
Yeah, so there's another one. And this is the one
that looks like islands too.
Well, that one would create kind of underwater reefs and tide pools. The one that is perhaps the biggest and most far out is called Blue Dunes, and this is a proposal to construct a chain of barrier islands that would go all the way from the middle of the coast of New Jersey all the way out to the tip of Long Island. You can see them in blue there, and this is literally dredging sand from offshore to create these islands that would, in the end, essentially look like natural islands. They might have rocks underneath them and then sand on top. They'd be about 10 miles offshore, and the goal is to create that's essentially natural breakwaters or natural seawalls that would keep the storm surge and the waves from hitting the coast where it currently is.
Well, how realistic are any of these?
Well, in particular with the Blue Dunes project, there are a number of hurdles. So there's a lot more research that needs to go into it. The current plan for those islands was based just on models. They basically ran forecast models of Hurricane Sandy and changed where they had islands off coast to see which ones prevented the flooding. They would need to do that for a lot more storms. Then they would probably need to get thousands, their estimate is thousands of permits that they would need to do the construction, plus the only ships large enough to do that kind of offshore dredging are Dutch ships, and they would actually need to get an exemption or a change in the law that says that work done in U.S. waters has to be done by a U.S. ship with a U.S. crew. So there's a huge number of hurdles, and then of course there's finances. I mean, they're estimating $40 billion for that project, which they say they'd be looking to get from a combination of state and federal government, and they're even talking with the insurance industry about ways that they could get them involved in funding it.
You know, it's interesting because we've seen this on a smaller scale, Plum Island, Scituate, Nantucket, where these erosion barriers have failed for one reason or another. So what would make us think it would work on this kind of a massive scale when it didn't work on the smaller?
I actually asked their lead scientist, Dr. Alan Bloomberg, that the other day, and basically it's a matter of the modeling beforehand, modeling this over and over till they really think they've got the design right, and then making them big enough. And again, the idea is basically to design back to what was probably there thousands of years ago when there was a set of barrier islands off the coast, as there is currently down in the Carolinas. They'd be about 10 miles offshore, and even with increases in the rate of erosion because of sea level rise, the estimate is that they would be there for hundreds to thousands of years before they've gradually worked their way back and hit the current coastline.
Well, it's fascinating. We'll see which one gets the green light, if any of them.
Yeah, they won't find out until later this fall. They've got a vague deadline just saying this fall sometime they'll announce who the winners are. And even when they win, they don't necessarily get funding.
Right, get their green light. All right, Heather Goldstone, thanks so much.